if you want to increase your vitality, feel more alive, debatable whether any product can actually do that, by the way, or maybe you feel like you're born to win, natus vincere, as it were. I shouldn't even have said that because it makes the pun too obvious. Or you're just, you've just been going through a phase where you haven't actually tried really great caffeine products, and maybe you just have a bad friend group who don't recommend products to you like gamer subs to you. They're just a bunch of just a bunch of silly people, just a bunch of silly people out there, aren't they? So maybe you could check out Delicious Gamer Subs. 2 of my favourite flavours, Sakura Splash, that's a sour cherry. It's more of a tangy cherry. It's not really like super sour and make it like my famous Listerine face one on E-League. Or you could try the Cherry Lime Skull. That's a sweet cherry, quite delicious. Like the girl next door, isn't it? Shout out Bok Cherry. You can get 10% off all Gamersubs products on their website, gamersubs.gg. Just use my code Thorin, Thorin. Right, I obviously have done a whole bunch of videos about the majors. So I did the Pick'em video, which technically, yes, I did do who's going to win the quarters, the semis, the final. But I did that more off vibes and narratives. And that's just like a very simple overview, like if they asked you for 30 seconds on a desk. But I said I would do, just like the last majors, separate preview videos for each of the sets of the matches. So I did the first 2 quarterfinals. Now, obviously, I was picking Spirit to win. Mouse ended up winning. I also picked Furia to win. Pain actually did the incredible upset. Now we are going to do the other 2 quarterfinals. We are going to do Vitality against NAVI and then FaZe Clan against MongolZ. And what I'm going to do is I've got... One of the problems in the past is I always just freestyled, like most Thorin starts content. But I've realised I actually sometimes get into the analytical mode on the Veto, and then I would forget to talk about like the player differences, or I would get into the analytical details in the Veto and the path, but then I would forget to add the narratives. And so sometimes those are all of it. So I've tried in theory to make a list, and we'll go through it that style. And I think hopefully that will be more effective as a way to do this video. So the first thing I'm actually going to show you is let's look at the paths of the teams as they get there. So obviously Vitality came in as, let's just start here, the biggest favourite in the history of the majors. Now, people are going to go, no, they're not, because they haven't won yet. And that's how fucking stupid people interpret things. Like, only once something has happened, are they like, oh, that was likely to happen. It's like, they're incapable before that. Like, essentially, silly people can only look backwards. They can't even look at the present, and they definitely can't project into the future. So if something hasn't happened yet, it can never happen. If something is happening now, it'll never happen. If something happened in the past, it will always happen, which is why it's just trash, as you'll notice. So one thing I want to get into at the beginning here is Vitality, in the history of CSGO and CS2, is the biggest favourite ever for a major. And do you want to know why that's actually quite a significant point? Because the second biggest favourite ever, this is why you have to listen to what I'm saying, not hear a word, then imagine what you'd like me to have said, because you heard someone else say it, or you have a simple response, and stupidly blurt words out at the screen or onto a fucking Twitter feed. Because the reason why the number 2 biggest favourite ever in a CSGO or CS2 major wasn't Astralis, NIP, fucking Fnatic. It was none of the Envious. It was none of these teams. The second biggest favourite in the history of the majors was Team Liquid, who didn't win the major. They didn't even get to the semi-finals, and they lost to Astralis. But because Astralis had won the last 2 majors, if you're using some dog polk, I'm a cretin and don't actually follow the game logic, Astralis was the biggest favourite. Now, they obviously weren't in the Starlight of Berlin major, were they? Because let's see how many events they'd won since the previous major. I believe it's 1 event. They'd won like a blast, I think. I might even have been for. I think it was just after the Katowice major. They even lost a blast final, if you remember. They lost the one to ENCE, which broke their nuke streak and ruined that record. Then after that, Team Liquid took over and won most of the events, and people will forget they won tons of events in a row, including all those Grand Slam events. They did have the CS Summit along the way that they lost, and they put this crazy streak where it meant that when they came into, and also they won IM Chicago right before that major, super dominant, and they came into that major, as people may or may not remember, I think they had, let me see, it would be 19 straight best of 3 or best of 5 series wins in a row on LAN. And then what happened is at that major, they had to win like 3 best of 3s, so then it went up to 22. And then famously, they played Astralis in the quarters, who looked mad ropey and had looked sus against fucking crazy, had gotten 2-0'd, including in clutch scenarios by NRG, had been all over the place, but then Astralis powered up round to round to round to round and eventually won the major. So in the same sense, the reason Vitality people will push back that they could be the biggest favourite is they're only looking at majors. I already saw people do this, by the way. I saw people watch Spirit win last major thanks to a life series for Magics and then turn around and act like even though the only event they won after that, were a real one, was Blast Bounty, and then they won a PGL Banana Cup where no good teams went. They then pretended they were like the favourite for the major now, or one of the they weren't one of the favourites. They only became one of the favourites technically once they made these playoffs because Falcons and fucking Falcons was out and Mouse just looked ropey. That's it. So you saw how that worked out. So anyway, the point is, over this season, there is only one name. It is Vitality. I mean, the joke is, except for Blast Bounty at the beginning of the season, which was like their first LAN best of 3 or whatever, or the second or something, with Rops in the lineup, every other tournament they have won, and they've never lost a series. In fact, their only loss after that period is a single BO1 against Randy-ass Legacy, who isn't even in the playoffs now. So the craziest thing for me is people are ignoring this detail as well. You do know no one else even gets a trophy unless Vitality lets them. Like, oh yeah, FaZe won one because they went to a PGL where they weren't there. Oh, fuck. Oh, look at this run. Oh, Mouse won a trophy. Yeah, Mouse won a trophy. That one was Spinks because it was a PGL that Vitality didn't go to. Oh, but Spirit just won a trophy. Yeah, they won a tournament that Vitality didn't go to. Like, if you actually watch the games, Vitality is such an enormous favourite for this major, even to this day now, that it is mental. Like, my favourite part is, this is why BO1 is trash, because they lost to BO1 along the way at this major, right, in the first game. And then what happened after that? They shit on the opponents so hard. I think their opponents in the other games in the Swiss System Stage 3 averaged something like 5 rounds against them. They literally are the most dominant team, I think, probably since Astralis 2018. I mean, 2019, Liquid is certainly up there too, but their problem obviously was Astralis was chilling a bit. And also, sometimes they'd win a lot of closer games, you know. I actually think, by the way, Vitality, technically, in terms of dominance when they're playing, might even actually be more dominant than Astralis. Because the problem is, you remember the first half of the Astralis dominance was when they used to be insane and beat people like 16-8 and stuff, and bang them all on T-side of Nuke. The second half was more like, I always say, once you've gotten over your initial success and your sort of dominance over the meta, and you have the best players and the best line, because everyone starts adapting, like their map pools to play against you, they get familiar without your playing style, they do things like they recruit people to combat you. What eventually happens is the gap closes, and then if you're a Fnatic and an IP and Astralis, what happens is you're truly great, so a bit like Federer and Nadal at the end, or Djokovic now, you steal a bunch on the way out the door by being veterans and being wily and being smart. I actually think Vitality isn't even at that point yet. They win all the time, and when they actually are in their like 9 or 10 out of 10 mode, they just smash everyone, including Falcons, Spirit, and Mouse. So obviously, spoiler, I'm going to pick them to win no matter what in every single series that we have here at this tournament. So they are the biggest favourite ever to come through. And actually, I was just talking about that. We may as well go and look at what happened in the Swiss Stage 3. So they didn't play either of the first 2 stages. If you don't get it, the reason it's not an advantage to play the previous stages is you might get randied on 2 of the BO1s. That might actually fuck your whole tournament. You might even, by the way, end up playing like Team Liquid did, like a fucking Mouse as your best of 3. And so then if you lose 1 BO3, basically, you've lost the whole major because of 2 randy BO1s. But the reason why teams say they'd rather do it is because it gives you warm-up. It means that during these weeks, you're not just playing like practices, which aren't the same as officials, and wondering how would this actually work in the game. Also, since they didn't go to that PGL, like, in theory, you've had like IM Dallas, but you've had a whole bunch of time where you've had weeks off while other people are competing. So if you're Vitality, this was the most likely game you would lose all year. The first BO1, yes, not against Legacy, admittedly, but a BO1 against a randy team that's not a massive favourite that you practice all the time. And then in this case, yes, also the map was extremely unlikely. I'll give you that, because Inferno, if you don't know, on paper might actually be the best Vitality map. It's clearly one that Apex has always loved to call on, and they had an unreal streak on it earlier this year. They are really, really fucking good on that map. clap. So that's obviously crazy. Then you get NAMIGA. By the way, I actually think probably... being as Lin Vision sort of overperformed most of the major and Legacy overperformed, technically NAMIGA might have been the worst team in this phase, by the way. I was actually surprised they even got through to this phase. So you get a gift there, you just bang them on Just 2, easy clap. Then you get 3D Max. Now look, traditionally, 3D Max can be a bit tricky if it goes to the Just 2 or the Inferno. They're a French side, they love those, you just don't play them on that. Play them on new. See ya, off you go, easy done. And then you get VP, who look, against other top teams, can drag you to deep waters, 3 maps, make it tricky. They had no fucking chance at all against Vitality. Let's just go and look at that quickly. When VP played Vitality, should be there. 13-6, 13-6. Not even close. And one of the problems for VP is their map pool does not play well into that scenario. So you got through very, very easily. You're just banging out the T side too, by the way. First half, like the games never even get close because you just basically win the first half. It's just over. So right now, then you go look statistically. Oh, what do you know? What do you know? Insane numbers as usual. And the difference is Vitality is one of the only teams in history where that's vaguely plausible. Everyone else, these were higher before. They all drop off and they are destined to drop off. Because for some reason on HLTV, for stats, they count like the playoffs matches and then stage 3 all in one. So that's what we're counting here. So these were much higher before. But these are going to fall away. They always were. Fury was never going to maintain... If you thought your Kindar was going to maintain those numbers on MongolZ, you're a fucking idiot. You've never watched CS or you're just a bozo. So... Oh, by the way, should we all apologise? Should your Kindar still be on Team Liquid, you fucking morons? No, of course he shouldn't. Then you go look at the players. Siwu, as expected, if anything, even over his numbers and what you can expect. That's absolutely unreasonable, KD, but he only played 5 maps, to be fair. Ro8, also over his numbers, especially the KD, but he has been very good. Like, yeah, that's only a bit over. Flame's actually about what you'd expect. Apex, as usual, it's been the whole year, it feels like this. Frag's way better than you'd expect for an IGL. Admittedly, part of that's like, yes, this mega team with all the roles set, etc., and they got all the maps, etc., etc., etc. And then Mezzy just does his job, but again, if that's your 5th best player or 4th best player, you're totally fine, mate. You're totally fine, especially when your best player's doing this and your second best player's doing this. So as expected, Vitality completely course corrected from that first BO1 on the first day. And remember, the course correction couldn't even be like you talk about it overnight. Because remember, the stupidest thing is you play the 2 BO1s on the same fucking day. So after they lost to Legacy, they had to come right back and immediately beat NAMIGA. Now, admittedly, it was NAMIGA. By the way, imagine a world where they get someone else. Sure, you'd have gotten the worst team because you're like the top seed in the 0-1. So I guess NAMIGA would have had to have beaten NAVI, which isn't like this. You always would have gotten a NAMIGA, by the way. It always would have been a bad team. So at least for Vitality, the seeding worked out. Other teams, less so, depending on where you ended up. So for Vitality, easy fucking run, even with a loss. Like, that doesn't faze me at all. Now, if we go over to Navi's side, another 3-1 team. By the way, this is where, if you are Navi, you are actually the most unlucky team in the whole tournament. Because you went 3-1. And as you can see here, 3 teams in Swiss always go 3-1. And so what happens is, because 2 of the 3-2 teams get assigned to the 3-0 as a reward, one of the 3-1 teams just gets lucky and gets to have another 3-2 team as if they'd 3-0'd. Now, look, you can say it for FaZe Clan. Of all the 3-2 teams to get lucky and get, this is one of the worst ones. Mouse would be the worst, but this is also pretty rough. And in general, to get MongolZ as a 3-2, they should be more of a 3-1 team, you'd think, historically. But taking out that, because first of all, FaZe has already beaten MongolZ, and MongolZ is one of the few teams they'll probably have a chance against statistically in the playoffs in terms of like... no, not statistic. In terms of like intangibles, like clutch factor, will they choke? Do they have big game experience? So instead, if you're Navi, you went 3-1. Your only loss was a 2-0 to Spirit. By the way, Spirit is better than you. Aside from that, yes, you got easy opponents in theory. But imagine a world where you literally, maybe you could have had pain. You could have had pain and gone through. Maybe you could have had MongolZ, and maybe you would beat MongolZ in the round 8. You'd be in the semis of this major now. Instead, it's extremely likely Vitality is going out in quarters after a major before they didn't even make the playoffs. And so I don't even think this result matters. Navi's roster is done. Someone is coming in to replace someone after this major, surely, because they've had a piss easy run. I mean, they got one hard opponent, and then after that, they just got rewarded with G2. And by the way, that was actually, where is it? That was actually probably way closer than it should have been. Like, I actually think for all the crying G2 did, I thought they somewhat, being in mind, I don't think with this newer roster and the standing, I don't think they really have had a chance to make playoffs for me, but I thought they actually played fairly admirably. And by the way, Inferno was Navi's best map at the moment, so that's actually a really worrying sign. Mirage, their second best map now statistically, that already tells you how much they've fallen off. They barely win that against G2. They've even been trying to make Anubis work this season. And then you go look at the actual results elsewhere. Oh, by the way, the 3D Max, yeah, that was on their best map, a fucking OT game as well. Admittedly, it's a map that 3D Max likes. Against Spirit, they had a close Anubis game. They got shit on Train. And by the way, they've tried to make it that, like, trains are possible. If you don't know, NAVI is already completely out of answers. They've already, in the Veto, gone everywhere they can. They've changed up their vetoing. They've changed up their picks. They've changed everything. They're not actually the team of last year when they had the most predictable Veto in the world, when they were an elite team. Now they've tried every possible answer, and there are none left. And the worst thing is, Vitality is the only team in professional Counter-Strike that there is no angle in the Veto for them right now. There is none. Right, their sixth best map probably was Anubis for a while, and teams tried playing it into them, so it just pumped up the win rate on Anubis and sample size. Like, they are just a team that is like, it's like a Stralis. They've superseded Counter-Strike in the sense that they're not playing the other teams or the maps. They're just playing Counter-Strike. And what they do can apply to every map. Like, the fact that they actually look like the best trained team is ridiculous. I don't even think that's a map that necessarily, like, you should be able to dominate, but they've got both the style, loads of the intangibles, the best player and players potentially. You could argue with the teams maybe have equivalent skill. And then also, they have great calling style. Like, they just have everything. They have clutch factor, they have up-tempo play, they have aggressive players, they have lurkers, they have AWPers, they have riflers, they have pistol play. They have everything. So if you're Navi, like, the joke is, last year you did the impossible by making all those finals and almost winning Cologne and having a major and all those titles, etc., and beating all these top teams in best of threes. The problem is, first of all, Vitality was already better than you with fucking Spinks, in my opinion, as in head to head. And then you've essentially just run into an absolute brick wall. So yes, Navi, quite a lot of issues in the last few months. But the problem is you're also now facing the hardest challenge in Counter-Strike, which is beat Vitality heads up on LAN in a best of three in an arena. Good luck. So let's get into that. And then also, even the Amiga game wasn't some smash. Although, when you're a favourite like that, you just win the game. It's not about anything more than that. So now if we go, and let's just look at the Navi players. So obviously, we'll go to... They're not even featured. By the way, that's been one of the biggest problems of Navi. I always said last year when they had the 7 finals in a row or whatever, the worst thing was... You looked at those player numbers that were all pumped the fuck up, and you were like, there's no way. Like, I'm sorry, you don't have, for real, 3 HLTV top 20 players. As in, you do, because HLTV top 20 is basically just arrange the teams that were the best in the year by rating, ignoring that they get inflated by being in the best teams, and punish people like Elise for not being in the best teams. So, sadly, people ignored that and just crowned them all as the new best players. Like, I was supposed to believe JL really was, like, one of the 10 best players in the world. Again, if you were starting a franchise, if we're going picks and we keep going down, if you pick JL in your first 10, I'm just getting a crazy advantage there. He's a good player, certainly, but he was no, like, superstar player. I always said there was no superstar player on that, except if you want to count Bit from being an anchor. You can maybe do that angle. Or Alexi B is an IGL, right? But that's not really what... Superstar really just means the super fragger, giga carry, etc. So, not a great time for Navi right now. And one of the worst things this year has been the firepower. Look at that. Like, Legacy mega outperformed Navi in terms of firepower. Again, slightly different opposition, obviously. By the way, laugh all you want at Liquid. Like, these are almost the same. But everyone's laughing at Liquid 0-3, and Navi's in the fucking playoffs. Why do you think that is? Well, let's have a look. Liquid actually had to play Mouse and fucking Mongols. Navi played Spirit, which is comparable to Mouse, and then what? Easier opponents. I hope people understand placing in the major isn't as relevant as placing contextualized by who you played and how you played. It's why I told everyone last major, Team Liquid went 3-0, but played shitter teams. Vitality, or whatever it was, and Vitality played like the same teams. Maybe it was 3-1, I can't remember. Basically, Vitality played like the same teams, but the difference is Team Liquid barely beat them. Vitality giga shit on them. So it's not the same, is it? So if we go to the players, it's not going to get good, by the way, guys. Look how far I have to scroll to get to the best NAVI player. The best NAVI players are JL and Imma. And it's not just the rating. Look at the KD. By the way, over 7 maps, they are plus 10 and plus 5 each. These are your best players at the moment. Wonderful's down there. At least he has the KD because he's an AWPer and a plus 20, but not particularly exceptional. And obviously, there are better, like people like Tosh have superseded him this year. There are just better AWPers in the world. Let's keep going down. Bait, the beloved Bait, 2-time major champion, is all the way down. By the way, the guy who won you that major with that Inferno performance, otherwise FaZe Clan would be sat on one. Fucking hell. And then look how far we have to go for Alexi. Before you go, yeah, but Carrigan is like 1,000 years older than him with 8 million events of wear and tear on his body. Give me a fucking break. So it's looking really bad for NAVI right now. In fact, I'll tell you one thing we'll look at quickly as well. Let's go and compare the setups of these teams. Oh, no, wait, we're going to do it. No, we can do that now, actually. Let's do it first. Let's do that now. Let's do that first. So NAVI's played 39 maps in the last 3 months. By the way, those numbers you saw hold over the last 3 months. You were thinking it was just this major and having a bad... No, this is the last 3 months. Over nearly 40 maps of sample size at real lands. By the way, one of those lands was a banana cup PGL bullshit one where they should have won the fucking tournament if they were any good. They didn't even get out the quarterfinals, if you don't know. So this is absolutely fucking appalling. But here's where it gets really depressing. This is T-side. This is a T-sided game. This is the T-side. You can't win with this. You can't win with this. This is actually as bad or maybe even worse than the NAVI that fluked the major last year. You cannot win a major with these numbers. Even on CT side where people farm, right? That's where AWPers farm, even then he has 0.13 rating. But look at the others. Remember Imma winning all those Mirage games? Even he doesn't dominate Mirage the same way. It's so fucking bad, guys. Then let's go to here. So they always had a decently spread out attempts. Right, Alexi does the most attempts, gets his head banged off. Then JL does a bunch, gets his head fucking banged off. And then Bit does that, and then give me a break. Like, by the way, that's just because he's the AWPer. That doesn't even mean anything that helps their T-side. This team is in so much fucking trouble. They would be against many opponents, by the way. Like, I'd actually been interested, quite frankly, to have seen them play against Pain. Or them play against FaZe Clan. In fact, I even said, once I saw Simple actually activate the last stage, I actually thought the real spicy matchup was just, give me, because I knew there was a chance it could both be 3-1. Just give us Simple in FaZe Clan against NAVI. Because obviously, if he wins that game, 1, maybe NAVI signs him again, or 2, maybe then FaZe just signs him, and then he's back and all that jazz. They were the team of the year last year, this roster. But this is a reason why I told people, as soon as they didn't make the playoffs or do anything at the last major, I would already have considered roster moves. I get what, listen, part of me understands the nature of the business. Like, you don't want to tell a team that just did all that, because they did, like, what, 2 bad events towards the end of the year. One was the major. Sorry, lads, one of you is fired. It's like, what the fuck? Look what I've been doing for, like, half the year. So I understand that idea that, like, you earned another season. Well, you know what? That season is almost over. In fact, spoiler, by the end of today, it will be over. So then you go over, and this is why it's just impossible. Last 3 months, look at this. Like, if you were just a team where take away Ziwu, if you just had that as your best player, that as your second best player, you'd be a pretty good team. You'd be like a top 4 team. You just add that onto what would be a star player for another team. I've always told people, you know what, I'll give you the analogy. I always thought when Rops went to FaZe and people used to say, once Frozen became the best player in Mouse, that, like, Frozen was better than Rops. I was always like, he isn't. Even if the HLTV rating tells you sometimes he is, he isn't. Similarly, when people always told me Flames is better than Spinks, it's like, he isn't though. I understand why you like his style of play, and he seems like a really cool guy, but he isn't a better player than Spinks. I would hope people, by the way, have now seen that in Mouse. Spoiler, Spinks in the last 3 years has now taken 3 rosters that have 0 overlapping teammates to the semi-finals of the major. He took those Ents players you don't even remember about because they all died off in Falcons. He took the fucking Vitality players that now are these players. And then he took, obviously, now these Mouse guys, who, by the way, weren't making major semis without him. This guy is a fucking stud, bro. So anyway, but Flames is very good. He's more of a T-side asset, isn't he? Mezzy is excellent in the Zipnik style that, like, he just brings the floor of your team up, doesn't make mistakes, communicates well with people, wins the odd clutch, entries if you need him to. And then Apex, even though the fragging here isn't that great, for an IGL, this is still very good, especially the style they play. And by the way, he puts himself in fragging position on CT side, which in theory, if he was bad, by the way, would actually tank his stats even more. He actually sort of keeps them okay. So if you go and look, unsurprisingly, their T-side is very hard to deal with. CT side, nobody can even fuck with them. Good luck on your T side, boys. This is why it's nightmare fuel for people like Spirit and sometimes Falcons to even play against these guys. It's nightmare fuel going into their CT side. Like, by the way, where do you go? If even Apex is a 1.10 KD and Mezzy is 1.21 KD on CT set, what site do you go to? You can't even do, and this is, by the way, why I also think Ziwu, if he doesn't win this major, or God forbid not even make the final, it will be such an enormous failure for him, because I don't actually think any number one, like, superstar type player, beyond maybe Simple with that Navi squad, but even then it wasn't quite as much, has ever had this much help. Like, this much help is so fucking crazy. Because if you don't know, the hyper carries like Ziwu, back in the day, Nico, more back in the day, Nico, Monacy last year, you go back to Simple, those players, you could even say Oscar and Mouse at one point in time, those players, when they're on form, you genuinely could do the noob tactic of, like, just go to the other side, or if you spot them, regroup and just navigate around them and make them do the retake or the save or the clutch. You can't do that anymore against Ziwu. I mean, on certain maps, by the way, the site you're actually going to have to hit due to how site pairings work up. It's sometimes even Ziwu's fucking tight. And they've even now perfectly orchestrated the fact that sometimes he doesn't AWP. That's like map specific. They do that on the right maps now and on the right sides. But when they need him to AWP, he does. And it's awesome. By the way, one thing that is crazy, though, is bear in mind he AWPs, so normally you get crazy KD diff if you AWP and difference. The fact that ROPS is like that comparable on a rifle is nuts. Now, true, he's also playing like probably the best rifle role to do that in the sense that you get to bait a bit because you're a bit lurky, but still very impressive. As you can imagine, this is completely impossible to play. So Flames doesn't have the greatest success rate, okay, but obviously his job is get mega hyphy, get crazy activity, and then get traded by a Ziwu. And by the way, Ziwu, especially his rifle, is fucking unreal to his side. And those are some of the best numbers you ever get. Yeah, not crazy. We're not talking Donk or Zantares attempt levels or Yikindar, but that's extremely good success rate for those attempts, by the way. You can't say more than that. Apex is even fairly decent for an old-ass guy. Mezzy just does his job as usual. So yeah, unsurprisingly, Navi is in a lot of fucking trouble in this series. So let's go and look. They haven't played at all with these rosters, by the way. One of the most bizarre things about these two teams is last year they played, but basically I think this was the second event Wonderful had joined Navi instead of Simple. So they played those two series and then they had the amazing Cologne run. Then they never played again. And then bizarrely this year, I mean, it shows how bad Navi have been actually, they've just never faced each other. Navi could never get to them. They always lost one series too early if they were ever in position 2. So if we go and look, this Veto is irrelevant. We're just going to look at the current one now. Now, the real problem is, Navi isn't a team that plays a million tier 2 teams. So let's just look at their map pool for a second, boys. This is bad enough against a lot of squads. Against Navi, you will never make it. Navi look like back in the day when Tyloo used to play bad teams at Chinese lands and just have an insane win rate on every map. So even though, by the way, it tells you they actually have an advantage on this map. By the way, first things first, like Vitality takes out the Ancient. That used to be like a swing map or in the middle of the map pool for Navi. It's terrible now. Navi tried to make Anubis work. Look at the sample size. That's now a map that Vitality doesn't lose on. On Train, which they did try to mix in, instead of making that the permaban instead of vertical like they initially did, you can't get Vitality on that either. You have a 1% higher win rate on Mirage because you're beating, let's see, Big, M80. You even lost to FlyQuest, you lost to Falcons. You're beating MIBR. What elite teams are you beating on this map? The answer's none. Then you go and look who Vitality's beating on that map. It's all the best teams in the world. So they're beating like Falcons, Mouse, Falcons, Mouse, and they're losing to OT to Falcons, and they lost to Mouse this time. Oh, they won Mouse again. They lost to Falcons here. They literally only lose to the best teams in the world. You go elsewhere, Inferno's become Navi's best map and they go to. That already tells you they're fucked. That was the map that was only good because of Alexi's calling and fucking bits CT sides, basically. And, oh, well, just both sides, actually. That's even a way better map for Vitality. You could argue it's their best map. Nuke's awesome for Vitality, but that's obviously the map that now generally gets banned by Navi. Should be, by the way. It was their weak spot even last year. Dust 2, forget about it. Navi tried to make Dust 2 work many times last year and coming into this year. Vitality, they do the classic, we are French, we are awesome on Dust 2. They just are. So spoiler, Vitality is better on every single map and by quite a large amount. So we go to a potential veto. There's not even anything to go off. We're just going to have to speculate for this one. So Navi, with their ban, it's no longer a permaban. What they've actually done, believe it or not, is they've mixed up their bans based on the opponent, which already tells me Blade actually, no matter what he says in an interview, identified months ago there were problems with this team, its construction, how people are performing, their map pool and their T-sides. And so as a result, he understood ages ago to start tweaking things and testing things and going different routes in the path, and it just hasn't worked, unfortunately. So believe it or not, they have actually, over the last 15 series, banned all 7 maps at least once. In fact, they've banned 4 of them more than once. 4 of the maps. So they've already been switching based on the opponent. So the most banned maps they've had were Dust 2, believe it or not. It's actually their most recent ban as well. And before that, it was Ancient. Which in this case, luckily, they're not going to have to ban the Ancient. So in theory, you would imagine immediately, by the way, because of these strengths, the ban actually suggests itself to Navi. What you do is, you just say, they're going to ban Ancient, so we ban Dust 2, and then we just play the rest of the series. Now, your obvious problem there, though, is would you ever get a pick of Anubis from Vitality? Now, so far, no. They don't pick it, believe it or not. In fact, teams pick it into them. So I actually think if you're Blade, that is the gamble. I don't think Vitality is even going to punish you and do the Anubis pick. I think you can let them just pick into their strength. Maybe it'll be an Inferno, maybe it'll be a Trent. Who knows what it'll be. Let them do it. Obviously, it would have been Dust 2 if you hadn't banned it. I think that's the obvious angle if you're Navi. You just do the Dust 2 ban. If you're on the side of Vitality, you must know this. They also aren't even a team with a floating ban. They 100% of the time ban Ancient. Now, this isn't the important to ban Ancient into, but you should continue to do that. When you're as good as they are, it's actually the time when it does make sense to have a permaban. I would only switch up the permaban if I were them, if either Vitality if Falcons or Mouse somehow start beating me on a specific map routinely and in a way where it's tangible to the eye. If not, I would just stick with this veto they've got because it's one of the best in history. It's a bit like back in the day, if you remember, how Astralis used to permaban Mirage because no one picked Train against them. But if anyone had have ever successfully made Train a real weapon against them, they could have just floated some Mirages against the teams that aren't good on Train, and then it would have been a much harder time for those teams. So that's how the veto works. And also notice, my theory about how veto works is it's not just what's a recent form. You're judging based on the picks, how they evaluate themselves, their opponent, and where their edges are. And that's why sometimes when you do a crazy gamble, like Astralis doing the Vertigo pick at Starlight of Berlin, that is a sign of desperation. That shows you don't want to play straight up on maps that you think that you can just lose on because they're the better team than you. So you're trying to find an angle or a prep angle or to throw them off guard. And if you win, great. But it doesn't mean you actually were better overall on those maps. That's just the angle you've taken to throw the opponent off. By the way, when you're Navi here, if you had an angle, you should take it, but there isn't one, unfortunately. What you should do if you're Navi now is say, we're so bad and you're so good, we're just going to ruin the veto. We're willing to fuck our whole veto up as long as it makes you uncomfortable putting you on maps you don't want to play and don't prep up. Well, spoiler, Vitality can play the ball. Especially because they have this one perma. So there isn't anywhere to go. Like, he could have said the Anubis, but then you're on 17%. Like, if Navi was an awesome Anubis team, like an Aurora, then they could take Anubis, right? And it would maybe give you a chance. That you don't even have that chance if you're Navi. So it's going to be 100% of the time a ban of Ancient from Vitality. Then you come to the picks. Right, the most picked map, even though Inferno's the one with the awesome win rate, is actually Mirage. Believe it or not, Navi doesn't pick Inferno. It's very rare. They picked it one time in the last 15 series. They have picked Mirage in 9 of the last 15 series. They didn't against Spirit and Aurora because they went with Train on those ones. But I think if you go and look at, and by the way, it was actually Team Liquid they picked the Inferno against. So if you go and look, this is a scenario where you probably do just have to pick Mirage, don't you? You can't pick into Inferno. Unless Blade and LXCB think they saw something in the Legacy game, and I don't think they did, because actually Legacy just shot the fuck out of them, believe it or not. And the Vitality did look like they had to warm up into the tournament. I would just do the Mirage pick. You've got to just go with it. It's always been your best map. It's always been Imma's best map. It's always been the map where the T-sides worked. It's always a great calling map for LXCB. I think it's also an excellent map, underrated quality for doing timeouts and doing adjustments on site setups, etc. I think you've got to do the Mirage pick. I don't care that Vitality knows you are. Don't worry about it. You just got to go into that. It's your only chance. It'll give you at least a tiny chance to win the map. By the way, remember, this is a bit fugazi. It's pumped up against bad teams. But it's your best opportunity. And also, spoiler, you're never going to get a Vitality Mirage ban. So you can pick it if you want. If you want to also pick Inferno and you have something crazy, okay. I would not do the gamble on Train. It hasn't worked for anyone so far. Vitality, even if you notice, will leave it till deciders and last maps. They're not worried about that one. They've even picked it themselves before, I think. Dust 2 used to be yours, but you also can't pick that. It's a death sentence, especially firepower-wise into Vitality. So I think you've got to pick the Mirage. It's actually quite an obvious veto for NAVI, in my opinion. Then you go over to the side of Vitality. Their most picked map is actually Nuke, which you're not going to get to play. Oh, wait a second. Actually, yeah, you will. You will actually be able to play that in this series. Let me have a look at this a second. Because the problem is there's only been 2 bans of Nuke by Na'Vi in the last 15 series. But technically, you should ban it now, actually. You're still shit on it. Yeah, OT lost to Astralis. In that case, I actually think you should do the Nuke ban then. And leave open Dust 2. But if you leave open Dust 2, spoiler, that's the second most picked map from Vitality. They will pick it. And it would be right to pick it. Ignore that the Veto says Anubis. You're not as versed on Anubis. Yeah, you just pick the Dust 2 if it's there. So that's actually even worse. You're probably going to get 2-0 here. Then you go to the second Veto. The second Veto for Na'Vi is either Anubis, which they would do in this case, I think. Train. It's not a terrible one either, but I would do the Anubis one, I think. Just because you're so bad on it. But then they spread it out. They also will do a Nuke. They will do an H. It depends what's left up. They've even done an Inferno themselves, by the way. And so the most played decider maps for Na'Vi are actually, believe it or not, Ancient, Nuke, Inferno, and then Dust 2 as well. But Ancient and Nuke are death. If you go to Vitality's side, their second most banned maps are Anubis, just not a map they choose to play. So they're threatening, basically you have to pick it into them in the first round. Or they take out Dust 2, if it's like teams that are really good on Dust 2 as well, as Spirit, and that sort of a Falcons maybe. And then they get to deciders. Most deciders for Vitality are on Train. I think there's a real chance this series will end up with a decider on Train. After that, then it's a mixed bag. They can go Mirage, they can go Inferno, less on Dust 2. So as a result, I think the real problem is you've got nowhere to go. You've got no answers if you're Na'Vi. I can't even conceive of a way beyond let Blade and Lexi be cook that you're going to win. Like, how player-wise are you going to win? How style-wise are you going to win? How are you going to win in terms of the Veto? How are you going to win in terms of... You can't win in terms of any of these things, in my opinion. So if it happens, this will be one of the biggest upsets in the history of the majors. Even though what's crazy is, it's actually Na'Vi's the only roster here that's won a major. And this 5-man lineup of Na'Vi was the team of last year. So to a Doug Polk, it will look like that. I actually think Na'Vi should be the favourite. But that will not make any sense to anyone who follows the game and knows how analysis works. So I'm sorry, I think this is an easy 2-0 for Vitality. I wouldn't even be surprised. Stage factor can affect this. If this was one of those series that's like 13-3 first map, 13-5 second map, and then Zewu and Rops are like plus 20 each or something ridiculous, could easily happen in my opinion. So then we'll go to the other series. FaZe against Mongols. I think really the game everyone's more hyped to watch in this round because we've seen it already. It was the game where Simple really popped off. And actually Mongols was supposed to be better than FaZe and beat them. So now it's giving people hope that this is legit from Mongols level and FaZe is just better. And also, if you've already beaten them, it's one of the few teams you could put FaZe against and potentially they're a favourite against because we've seen so few maps from FaZe. And remember, you'll see it in a minute, FaZe has only won on 3 different maps, by the way, at this major. So they don't have a crazy map pool. I mean, a lot of it hasn't been tested. They've played a very low sample size, obviously. But as a result, a lot of other teams did have a hard time even getting the Veto against. So we'll go look at the Veto in a second. But first things first, let's go back to the old stats-a-rooney. So Mongols and FaZe, very similar level of fragging. Admittedly, FaZe played fewer maps, so quite comparable. The problem is, especially after you've had the scenario where Yekindar and Molodoi fucked off out of here. Now, obviously, Simple's actually now the third highest rated player in the tournament. This is a guy, remember, who played one tournament before with Standing Skulls, and aside from that, hasn't played any maps in 2025 officially. I told you, this guy is just an alien. Like, I would give the benefit of the doubt to a Ziwu, a Donk, a Monacy, if they went away for a while, that they'd come back and have a chance to do this. But this is the only guy where I was almost certain it would happen. In fact, I always say this. The people who go, well, what about when he was in Falcons? He was shit then. I don't think he watched the games. I genuinely don't think he watched those games. He was incredibly out of shape, and even then he was easily their best player, and actually was sometimes the best player in the server, half the maps. And that was a nightmare fuel team that made everyone look shit. So, as you can imagine, FaZe is in pretty decent shape. You got Simple all the way up here. Great AWPing. Elysia's doing totally fine. Rain is doing better than you'd expect. The downside at the moment is Frozen's fragging's really good, but his rating's not that great. Just has a little bit of a baity style, doesn't have a great plus minus, but you expect that to level up. And by the way, as long as Frozen and Elysia are both playing well, they're a great combo. So then add in the AWPing. This is why I told people. This is why I never got the take from like Kassad that like it wouldn't work. Just like Nico and Monacy were going to walk into Falcons. Bro, I didn't even need Simple to be this simple. He could have been at like this, like 1.17 or something, or like an NQZ's number. He just had to be better than Brokey. He's just a way better. He's a rich man's version of Brokey. In fact, he is Jeff Bezos's version of Brokey. There's the joke for you. I would have gone with like the fucking black nobility of the former Venice city state and all that shit, but you just don't know about that. You ain't woke and based like me. I mean, I'm definitely not woke. Woke used to mean sort of based back in the day, believe it or not. So then you go down. Obviously, you had to go all the way to the bottom for Carrigan. But the point is, this is why when people said Carrigan maybe should go, maybe with other squads. That's why I always wanted him to get a Simple. If you have a Simple, Carrigan can be down there with these numbers. Because you've got the player that cancels it out up here, and then it's about how does the rest of the squad play. Whereas you go look at Mongols, Senzu's playing awesome, but how many times have we seen that before the playoffs? The joke is, if playoffs didn't exist, this guy would have already been a top 20 player last year, I think. He's a really good player. He is their best player, eye test-wise. The problem is, he is also their device, their choker. He's the guy who just shits the bed in most of the playoff series he's played. So will this hold? Like, I don't know that Simple's number will hold yet, but will this hold? Probably not, history says. Then you go down. This should be 9-10 if I listen to every other pleb out there, because he's got the flashy style. It isn't, of course. He's not even on your fucking screen. Slightly overrated opera, in my opinion, even though he's fun to watch. By the way, he's kind of like the Brokey of Mongolia, isn't he? Blitz is there because he's actually one of the best fragging IGLs in the game. Both IGLing and fragging, by the way. And let's go down some more. You have to go all the way to here for Mongols. By the way, you would all make fun of fucking Wonderful. And by the way, miss me with the rating. I don't care what a Serbian guy says. Look at the KD. His KD is way better. But you tell me Wonderful shit right now should be replaced. Well, there's your beloved 9-10. Mazzinho, by the way, was the guy towards the end of the year that leveled up massively and was part of the reason why Mongols got really dangerous, even without Senzu getting his shit together. He's actually had quite an underwhelming tournament. Admittedly, he's very young. And then I wonder why everyone on their team has to constantly tell me this player who's not an IGL is really a good guy and contributing. He makes a great cup of tea. He's got a lovely personality. He's bubbly. He's a fucking glue guy. Yeah, because of this. Because of this. Mate, he plays like he fucking eats the glue to become the glue guy. What's great is I would say that on fucking camera as well. I'm just like that, mate. I'm just built like that. You ain't. You ain't like that. FaZe even has reasonable... This is doable. Maybe not with Simple's numbers, but you'd expect Frozen's to come up. This is even plausible to maintain at this level. And it's probably just enough to let Carrigan Calls give you a chance to win. Mongols isn't too far off. They're okay. The problem is you just expect Senzu to fall off and you don't know who will come up. I would expect Mazzino to come up a bit. 9-10 maybe a tiny bit up. So I would expect similar firepower between the two teams. So crucially, let's go look at the Veto. Because we've already obviously beautifully seen one of these not that long ago. We saw one, how many days ago would that have been? It's the 20th today. They played on the 14th, so a week ago. Mongols removed Train, which, by the way, already is a fuck up by the Mongols. Because you're playing against Carrigan, who doesn't have an established map pool yet. He bans Train. What happened was there's been 4 opportunities to ban in a series for Carrigan. He's banned Train twice and Inferno twice. Get ready. Because the 2 times he banned Inferno, the opponent took out Train. He wants to not play Train because he hasn't had time to get all his team up to speed or have any official matches. But you just give him the advantage in the veto. By the way, so many people did that. Even Blade and Navi used to do that to teams last year and give other teams who were Vertigo banners the advantage by banning it. So I think already if you're Mongols, first thing you fix is you just float Train. I do not believe FaZe is going to pick it. Challenge them to pick it. I don't think they will. But I imagine you'll pussy out sadly and you'll just remove Train. Then FaZe removed Inferno. That's the map they remove if people ban Train. By the way, the reason why that's significant in this case is you ain't bad on Inferno. You sort of low-key like it, don't you? So you removed Inferno. Mongols picked Ancient. That's always been their comfort map, and in my opinion, eye test-wise, their best map. Amazingly, that was won, by the way, by FaZe. They barely beat MIBR in OT, and then they shocked Mouse in the opener. By the way, beating Mouse on Mirage's Inferno. What am I talking about? Ancient, not bad. That's a map where you have to worry about the exertions of the world. Then FaZe picked Anubis, just because what can they pick? They have to go with some loosey-goosey shit, don't they? That was a map that they'd beaten Tyloo on, MIBR on. They'd lost big to Aurora, probably one of the best teams, if not the best team on Anubis, and then they'd beaten Legacy on it. So, okay, understandable why you went with that. You did win that big, which, by the way, is a bit sad for Mongols. You'd think they'd be better on that map. It's one that they've tried into Vitality themselves. So, Aurora, they barely lost to on. Beaten Liquid a couple of times. Oh, that one. No, that's okay. I think this is the first one that I'd show you, though. So if we run this veto back, and then the nuke would have been the decider, which, by the way, would probably have been a fun game, right? There'd already been a loss for FaZe on that one. There would have been a lot of pressure on them. If you're Mongols, you're not bad on nuke. Look, one of your losses to Vitality, 2 of them are to Mouse, one's close, and you even beat Vitality on it. So you could actually argue if Mongols had gotten through the first map, they might have won this series. So there is chances for Mongols to win, but obviously the choke factor is going to be a major issue for them right now, isn't it? So let's go to do the veto, and we'll ask what will happen this time. So last time it was Train and Inferno. I think, sadly, it will be Train and Inferno again. That's just logical. Then for the picks, Mongols, will they pick Ancient this time? Well, the other options are, they can also pick Mirage. It's available. It's one of the maps that they actually pick, believe it or not, the most out of the last 15 times they've played series. And it's not a map, so far, that we've seen anything from FaZe. They've lost on that one. Quite big to Legacy. So if I'm Mongols, I'm switching it up. Because FaZe also, by the way, second removed it, which you now know. The veto is telling you pick Mirage. I know Ancient's been the map you liked before, but I would just do the Mirage pick here. That's the one that seems the most logical one to go with if you are the guys from Mongols. Then if you're FaZe, you can do the Anubis pick again, especially because of how it went last time, but in theory they're going to prep for that. If you don't do that, where are you really going to go? Are you going to get, look, FaZe, Carrigan's always liked Nuke, but is he going to go for that? Dust 2. You beat Heroic, but then you lost to Legacy on that one. You could do that as a pick, though. I think there's a real chance you just pick the Anubis. Now, if that happens, choke-wise, it's probably still a FaZe win. But in theory, Mongols can get to the third map. So then the crucial thing for me is this. Will FaZe then be the ones who remove Ancient when they win it themselves? Interesting question. What ends up as the last map? That's the interesting thing. But I've got to say, this is a series where I am going to pick FaZe to win it. The reasons why should actually be fairly obvious, I think. They just have way better intangibles. They have loads of experience within that. They have the super duper players on stage. They have the best caller on stage. By the way, people who go, oh, you can't just say that FaZe players want to... Look, they played badly this season with that roster because that roster was flawed. But every other version of FaZe since Ro8 rejoined has had this quality. It doesn't have to happen every time. You bozos act like when something happens 2 times out of 20, it happens every time. When something only happens 15 out of 20, what, that doesn't count? Give me a fucking break. So I actually think there's a very good chance FaZe can win this. And spoiler, since Payne won the other game, I think FaZe is going to the finals. Whoever wins this game is probably going to the final. I think FaZe is going to the final, which is also going to be bonkers. The idea simple walks back into CS, goes to the final. Carrigan's just in all the major finals in CS2. Now look, the bomber is, he's probably going to lose them all. But even so, that's nuts. The idea Reigns in all these finals. I mean, that would just be some incredible shit. If you add in CS Goh after the COVID period, well, let's think. We had 4 majors after the COVID period, and now we've had 3 majors in CS2. Imagine being in 4 of the 7 finals. That's nuts. Yeah, 4 of the 7 finals. Bonkers. Not that much more to say about this series, though, is there really? Like, it's also a bad sign that 910's not playing great. He's going to be going into simple, especially, by the way, he doesn't just shoot you. He has a style that's really intimidating. It makes you play more passively or feed and get fragged. I expect Frozen to play better. No one knows yet how Alicia's form will be. Really, actually gets to play playoffs, except for PGLs, right? Carrigan's going to outcall the fuck out of Blitz, although certainly Blitz can frag him. I think you need some epic hero players for Mongols, and you need to absolutely shed that whole choker thing right now. Look, it won't do it because FaZe isn't a top team at the moment, but it'll help. Semis in the major will do a lot psychologically, and then knowing you're playing Pain, you should actually believe. You should believe. If I'm Mongols, for real, as a team captain, I'm telling them, look, this team's still inexperienced together as a squad. They haven't got the map pull figured out. We beat them in this match. We're going to the finals, boys, and then who knows? Because, by the way, maybe in the other side of the bracket, maybe it's like a win for fucking Mouse this time somehow. And then you get Mouse in the final. That wouldn't even be a bad matchup for you Mongols. That's kind of a fun game, right? So I actually think this is a FaZe all day long for me.
Hey, it's simple. You're watching Thorin channel. Shut the fuck up, you fucking bitch.
You know I'm always rep my set. And the people who've got my back are the following people who support my videos. Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Jasun, Jensen Goh, Tosh, Toucan, and you know the all-time ride or die, Jerky's Minion, isn't it? Special thanks to him. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Want to find out who the upcoming interview subjects are? Do you want to take part in one of those long discussions with me where you set the topics? Maybe you want to ask me a question for my video AMA? Well, all of those perks and more are available where? At the Patreon link in the description box below. So put your money where your mouth is and join the Scroominati today. You dig?